Welcome to Chapter 9 of Millennial Man, the 13th floor. This is Chapter 9, Justice. Justice. Definition of 1. The quality of being just. 2. The principle of moral righteousness. 3. The upholding of what is just, especially fair treatment and due reward in accordance with honor and standard of law. Equal treatment under a system of written and publicly accessible rules. 5. The administering of punishment or reward. Millennial men. This issue is one of the most important issues you will ever consider. In our country, there are multiple examples of both justice and injustice. As men, we need to be able to recognize both and not mistake either one. It is my hope that all who are reading or listening to this want to be men of justice and stand up to injustice. A lot of people give mouth service to the idea that they want justice for themselves and others. Some people even claim to be victims of injustice at the hands of others, having been denied just and fair treatment. Unfortunately, sometimes they themselves treat people unjustly and unfairly. In order to receive and administer true justice, one must recognize and respect the system of law and order you are dealing with. Many systems of law and order are not necessarily compassionate to human need. However, the American system is the most people-friendly system of law and order. That is why a lot of people around the world want to come here, and why many low-status people can reach great successes here. Men, we need to be willing. We must be willing to admit and submit to the evidences of truth in order to reap the benefits of justice and freedom and be able to fight injustices properly. The same goes for being able to have positive and beneficial discussions about the topic. Also, a willingness to learn is always helpful. If a man is unwilling to learn, admit clear and present truth, and be honest with himself and others about truth, we cannot expect to have significant breakthroughs on the matters of justice and injustice. As millennial men, we will pledge to admit truth and be honest with ourselves in order that we may be able to be men of justice. We have come a long way in our whole human history, and we have a long way to go. Understanding justice, whether it be in our homes and community or in the leadership of our government and nation, is a serious matter and is achieved only by close consideration of the details. Excuse me. The grand opportunity for the millennial man in America cannot be had anywhere else in the world. If and when all of you could rise to the call of justice with honest intent, with a passion for unity and a drive to maintain freedom, our nation can and will be better than ever before. We will see a huge decrease in injustices of all kinds and a unity never before seen in America. The ideas of what is right and what is wrong, what is just and what is unjust in a nation as diverse as the United States of America will certainly vary. There will be many opinions. In order to come to the truth of the matter, one needs to consider our own and other people's level of knowledge and understanding, education, and ability to consider evidence without bias or preconceived notions. Those notions are often driven by emotions, tradition, or misinformation. Too often people cry for justice, and unfortunately a lot of people are themselves living unjustly. These people allow emotions, pride, arrogance, and anger to blind them and dull the sharpness of rational thought. This emotional state hinders intellectual abilities in all people. Millennial men, it is up to us to see and teach truth clearly as we rise to the occasion we've been called to individually. Anything that involves people has some level of corruption because people allow selfishness, arrogance, pride, and greed to corrupt them. Remember this, the American justice system is not a people but a system, an idea of principle. In my understanding, it is the greatest, most fair, and just system in all the world, the most beneficial to the common people. People who are rich and powerful often put in a lot of years and a lot of work to attain those positions of power and riches. A lot of resentments and divisive attitudes get hyped up and blown up on accusations that the poor and minorities suffer terrible injustices at the hands of rich politicians or the corrupt system of government. This is a problem, even though this may have only a tiny, tiny bit of truth if the realities are twisted just right, but it's not nearly the problem of what holds we the people down. What holds we the people down is lack of education, knowledge, discipline, and self-control, and action towards these things by the millennial man. Let's face it, men, we are the leaders of our own future and are ultimately responsible for our nation's state when it comes to the general populace. If you were a rich and powerful leader, what would you do to ensure justice? Please think on this. We have the minds and hearts of our next couple generations in our hands by being the educators and leaders of our youth, who will be our future leaders. We are failing to be men of justice in our homes, communities, and nation, yet we claim to want justice from our leadership in the government. This is such an important discussion among all men, but especially for the millennial man. We have many examples and levels of justice and injustice to consider. Take some time to think of some. To paint a clear and precise picture of the issue should not be difficult, as long as one can admit truth and see logic, even when to do so causes us discomfort or is offensive. However, we are men and we must deal with, not ignore, the painful and hard truths. We have strength, ability, freedom, and an important purpose, men. We must become more involved in our homes, communities, and nation, and the democratic process. No longer can we shirk our responsibilities for passing pleasure, personal gain, or whatever may distract us from the realities of responsibility. We cannot claim to be victims of injustice when we ourselves are living unjustly. We cannot claim to recognize injustices when we are blinded by our own selfishness, foolishness, and lack of regard for our fellow man. To do so simply makes us look like fools to those who really are striving for justice with integrity and self-sacrifice. Everyone can find room for improvement. When we all collectively improve ourselves, we will all collectively reap rewards. But understand, to live for justice isn't always rewarding in ways you may be thinking. We must be honest about this, men. If we cannot be honest, who will? Who really suffers the greatest injustice in our entire nation? Minorities, Jews, Christians, rich, poor, old people, young people, homosexuals, Muslims. I'll tell you who suffers the greatest injustices, and it's got nothing to do with race or religion. There's no doubt you can find some injustices no matter where you look in a nation of 300 million plus people. But the victims we should be talking about are children, especially the fatherless children. Children are being neglected, abused, left to fend for themselves in many ways. One way is not being instructed in the things that really influence positive growth. Unfortunately, children are too often in homes and communities that lack strong, compassionate, active, intelligent fathers, leaders, and teachers. A great number of young men and women grow up with no active fathers in their lives. This can be, number one, fathers that are altogether absent. 2, fathers who do not take initiative to lead, teach, instruct, and discipline their children. 3, fathers paying little attention to their existence. 4, fathers who are involved but don't really know what to teach their children. 5, men in close proximity, such as family, friends, neighbors, etc., who don't care to give the fatherless their time. 6, fathers who may be abusive. The children in these situations are suffering an injustice. The mothers are suffering an injustice, and the community suffers an injustice, and the nation as well. Where are the men who donate sperm, have multiple children, and leave them to the care of burdened down women, government, institutions, and the streets? These children are growing up with lack of any real solid guidance from a man's perspective. These children are our future. They need good education at home and at school. They need to gain good qualities and good characters. They need the qualities we are discussing in Millennial Man in order to be good parents, leaders, and productive members of our free society. This is the greatest injustice, and the only solution is for men, millennial men, to take the initiative to care enough about the issues to act on and give themselves to the cause of true justice. We must start with recognition of the problems, even when we ourselves are the problem. Then we must recognize the solutions and give ourselves to them. Home, community, then nation. We must become the fathers, leaders, and teachers of our youth in order to secure the future of freedom, liberty, justice, and unity. It is not up to the government to train and teach our children. We cannot teach what we do not know, understand, and realize. Therefore, we need to be willing to learn. This requires the ability to admit that we don't know it all, and we don't really have it all together all the time. Millennial men, we need to use our talents, abilities, and strengths to learn and to inspire and to teach others, men and women alike. We must fall in where biological fathers fall short. Those men who are unable to be actively involved in the lives of children or just refuse to properly teach and lead our children. There is no solution to any injustices if we cannot address this greatest of injustice. When we set right some of the injustice we see in society, then we must have a generation ready to take over the responsibilities of holding up justice. Therefore, to teach the issues addressed in Millennial Man to our next generation will allow us to have a dependable future. Justice will not stand on its own. There is no use fighting for justice that will not last or will be allowed to deteriorate once again. We must be men of justice, teach the values of justice, and by doing this, we will be working towards a future of justice. Unfortunately, we cannot change the nation overnight. It's a process. We have much room for in-depth considerations on the subject, and much room for men who are willing to really serve their community and nation. We have done well to consider the issues we have. This is our start. To consider and to act on are two different things. There is no sense fighting for justice just to see it diminish over time again. We all want some form of justice, and we all get angry, upset, or offended when we experience or see injustices in and around our life. Let us use this fact to motivate us to get more involved. If we can face the truth of this issue, we will be better equipped to face other issues as well, from the simple to the complex. Millennial men, we must care about true justice. This involves being men of integrity and moral principles, even when others will refuse. If we expect to understand clearly this matter of justice and injustice, we should not allow ourselves to fall into the trap of accusing others of failure to institute justice without cause or because of our own moral shortcomings and any bitterness, laziness, or resentment. Sometimes it is very difficult to admit our faults, and it's easier to point fingers at others. We waste valuable time playing the blame game instead of working on viable solutions. We have plenty of opportunity to tackle the problems we face as a nation. Let's get to it. The millennial man has to see truth clearly concerning these issues in order to be effective in the real fight for justice and freedom. Regardless of what the mainstream narrative is, this great land of justice suffers a great injustice at the hands of men of our society. You and I, or any other man who has previously shirked his responsibility as a father, leader, teacher, protector, and provider. Now's the time to realize our error and work towards real solutions, working together to pass responsibility to the generations to come. Let us not think justice takes no effort to hold up. It takes all of us to be involved in order for our system to benefit all of us. It is our lack that has led to injustice growing. Millennial men, we must learn to be men of justice.